And so we get to the Genie, the big bad guy at the end of the game. Even though it is a shame to see this in one of the best retro Mario games out there, Super Mario Land 3 fell into the trap of waiting until the end of the game to actually put the plot in the game and actually have a reason for why we were doing any of this nonsense and all of this platforming. I do respect what Nintendo did, because what people will say to defend this, if, I ever got any opinions on the game, is that, well, of course, Super Mario Land 3 waited until the end of the game in order to put the plot into it. It's an old game, therefore they didn't have the technical advantages of the now in order to actually have a story in the game. And to that I would say, you're completely wrong, because they were able to do that here. They were able to do it during the final boss fight, so saying that they couldn't because of technical limitations means that this couldn't exist, and so it really should have been at the beginning of the game. It didn't have to be like a whole cutscene thing, but we really should have seen Captain Syrup at the beginning of the game instead of at the end of the game, because that would have shown us that there was actually a cohesive end point. There was a final villain in all of the random creatures and pirate weirdos that we've been killing up to this point. And basically the plot of the game is that Captain Syrup was leading these pirates to get a bunch of gold. She found this genie in, the prototypical magic lamp thing, and she was able to find enough gold to pay the genie to create Skull Castle, which is where we found her, as a super duper hideout, and she could live in harmony, riches, and fame forever. It's not the most robust thing in the world, but for a platformer, and especially ones that came out in the mid-90s, and from Nintendo, it's definitely a solid plotline. Not everything has to be bombastic and multi-timeline and encyclopedias full of plot in order to actually get a point across. Here, we're seeing in a very small window of time the entire plot that this game actually needed. If it had a lot more, then it would just be completely unnecessary. Unless it was for, fleshing out the bosses, which a little backstory for boss fights is always a good thing. You don't have to go overboard with it, but it's always nice to kinda get the motivations and get what they're all about before we actually kill them. Not as necessary for a Mario game, because usually they default to just random creatures and random giant minion people. It's just what they do, and I can't fault them for that, but there's always ways to improve, just like with the Genie boss fight that we just saw. And the main thing that I would say that needed to be improved was that the game needs to stop relying on random chance. See, the basic gist of the boss fight is that the genie flies around at the top half of the screen. Wario needs to jump on his head, which is a lot harder than it sounds. The best way to do that is to grab the Genie's lamp, which the game obviously doesn't tell you to do. It's another thing that could have been improved. If we saw when the boss fight started, I don't know, Captain Syrup dropped the magic lamp and it created a cloud, that would have been enough of an explanation in order to get the point across, but the game doesn't really show you that, so it's kind of a shadow weakness, but not really. The big problem is that you throw the Genie lamp, and it rolls like a dice. The result could be hard-coded to, just cycle through, or it could be random depending on how the Genie lamp was thrown, which is kind of a lot of weird amount of coding for a Game Boy game, but whatever. Either way, it's too much time to reliably get a cloud to then jump on the Genie, which means we're just wasting a bunch of our time throwing the lamp over and over and over again while we're being assailed by the Genie just to get a chance to jump on his head. And it's not a guaranteed hit, because if the cloud spawns in a wrong spot, then you end up losing your chance to jump on the Genie and get the damage. The other way that you can jump on the Genie, and this is very unpredictable, is that the Genie spawns smaller Genies. You can use these smaller Genies as a platform to get up to the Genie, but it is very imprecise to do that, and I wouldn't recommend it, because like with the other bosses of this game, you get 2 HP. If you take any damage, then you revert back to Short Wario, no matter what form you were at when the Genie hit you, which means that it is very hard to get that back. It is still possible to kill the Genie with Short Wario, but it is definitely not ideal. So that could have been improved. Like, I don't think it would have been too much of a stretch to either make the minions that you could jump on better positioned to do so and slower to make it more reliable, or just make the Genie lamp throwing a guaranteed cloud throw, because the way that it is now, because the Genie lamp produces clouds so randomly, you can't rely on when the cloud spawns. So, you end up just throwing the Genie lamp all over the place and just hoping and crossing your fingers that you get the right side up to get the cloud. That means it could be spawning anywhere, and you can't plan for that because you're battling an RNG system while having to dodge attacks and all this other stuff, which means that really the planning of where the cloud is going to spawn is not the first thing on your mind, because it doesn't look like it, but this is a sort of fast-paced fight, so you got a bunch of different things on your mind while you have to just fight for your basic survival. It definitely feels like a satisfactory end to the game. It's a great boss fight, but there are just a couple of things that end up hurting it overall that could have been easily improved. And I've said this in a bunch of recent videos, like during the Assassin's Creed Chronicles run, and a couple of boss fights from that, is that games and part of games being ruined or at least tarnished slightly by really simply badly made design choices. Like, this isn't introducing a racing mini game into the middle of a boss fight and having all that time to code something in the middle of a boss fight that has nothing to do with it and having that wreck the boss fight. Like, this isn't complicated. All you needed to do was design the Genie lamp cloud spawning thing to be a bit more reliable, which could have been done just by guaranteeing a cloud spawning whenever you threw the lamp. Like, that's not hard. Change the speed of enemies, that's not hard. Or, I don't know, have the Genie dip down, like, during one of his attacks so that you could have an opening just naturally happen because the boss was an idiot. And it really is kind of a shame, because this is the one thing about this game that I remember back when I played it as a kid, because this was the one thing that made this game actually a possible game, and like I said in an earlier video from this series, getting a retro game when you were a kid that you could actually beat was a rarity because of just how arcade-like these games were built, and how much consequences death was back in a retro game. Being able to beat the Genie and beat the game was a big thing. And I really wanted the Genie to, be, from a modern perspective, a really great boss fight, and it is still really good. It's just, Nintendo Handheld could have took a couple steps back, looked at it again, and chose a couple alterations. That's all I'm really asking for. Everything about this is great. Like, it has the plot that we needed from earlier in the game, it has the satisfactory and challenging boss fighting gameplay, the platforming stuff that actually makes this fun to play. I don't want to end up taking lives lost because, like I said, this is a lot more challenging than it looks to actually get done, just because I was waiting for a cloud that never showed up because of a tiny design mistake. Overall, it's a really great way to end the game, and it definitely still shows that Nintendo handheld has got it, and I hope that they take this new Wario Land series that they went with and, you know, end up making it great for the next 10 years. That's what I really hope for, and it looks like they got a good head on their shoulders to damn well do it, too. So check back next week when we're looking at another one of their great games.